So thank you so much, Angela, and thank you for organizing all of this, the 2020 FFLN Summit. I'm so excited to be here. As a member of the FFLN, I'd like to welcome everyone and thank you all for being here as well. I will be monitoring the chat, so if you have any questions, please feel free to write them into the chat area. At the end of the speech, I'll be happy to read the questions out loud. It's my honor to be introducing you today to Cara Coleman. Ms. Coleman is a program manager with Family Voices National and the author of I Am Justice, Hear Me Roar, about her daughter Justice with special health care needs and disabilities. She is an instructor of pediatrics at the Virginia Commonwealth University Medical School Innova campus. She is the Family Voices Liaison to the American Academy of Pediatrics Council on Children with Disabilities Executive Committee and on the Board of Directors of the National Institute for Children's Health Quality. In the past, Cara has worked as an adult health specialist, a case manager for homeless pregnant women, a counselor in a shelter for battered women, a law clerk for a judge, immigration subject matter consultant, and an attorney serving low-income immigrants. Cara is a graduate of the University of Notre Dame, has a master's in public health from Tulane University, and a law degree from Temple University. Great credentials. Cara is the 2019 Moose Krause Award winner for Distinguished Service from the University of Notre Dame Monogram Club. Cara's speech today is titled Pivoting for Purpose, A Family Leader's Journey. And now I would like us all to extend a warm welcome to Cara Coleman.
Thank you guys so very much. I'm gonna have to stay paused on this slide and reflect for a moment so that I can get my, not so much nerves, but the emotions out. Already, I've just met you guys joining 45 minutes in and I find myself tearful and reflecting. I think it was part of my preparation for this. Gosh, how do I talk about myself and my journey and my path, or walk down memory lane? You guys are using all the same things and reflecting about where you guys have come, where you've been, where you are in the Florida Family Leaders Network, and it is amazingly impressive. And I also find myself very emotional and reflecting a lot this week with the loss of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who was a tremendous, gotta get it out, inspiration to me as a woman, as a mother, as a wife, as a lawyer, as a family leader. I love to draw parallels between, you know, she was working on the law and equal rights under the law. And I think that we do a lot of that same stuff as family leaders and as providers and professionals caring for kids with special health care needs. We don't always say, I dissent, but we sort of do. We come together and say, that may not be working. Let's look at and listen to this and make things come together right. So while I am tremendously sad at her loss, I find myself reflecting and inspired and leaning more towards hope and looking at what can I do better? How can I fight harder? And she was one of many women who have taught me you can do anything, even when you think you can't. Okay, I think I've gotten the tears out, but I warn you clearly if they start that way that they'll be rising up again later on. So next slide, please, Avery. All right, trying to formalize myself with giving you a few objectives so that perhaps as you meander with me on a journey through my life and becoming a family leader, you'll be able to keep pace with what I'm trying to talk about and make sense of it. So the objectives are really just learning how to embrace the shivit, and I'll explain what that is in a minute. Everyone stops there and going, what in the world is a shivit? Building resilience, and finding and leaning into passions that are really skills and purpose that cause us all to move forward and to connect and collaborate together. And then moving to action. Next slide, please. All right, what in the world is a shivit? I have often reflected throughout my life that has been quite a path of turning and twisting, that there is also this thing called a shivit, which is what we often do as parents of kids with special healthcare needs. Not only do we pivot as you're seeing in this skiing path here, but you shift. The shift is sort of represented by this close up on the skier here. I mean, you're sliding. There are times all of us in our life feel like we're careening down this hill out of control. And hopefully you Florida people who are in the Sunshine State can relate to or contemplate what it's like to go down a big old mountain of snow. Perhaps we imagine a massive sand dune and that you're careening down the sand dune and shifting and pivoting the whole way down. But, you know, shifting and pivoting like we've had to do in the pandemic, like we've had to do in our lives with children with special health care needs and in our lives in general, it's not easy. But you have to, or I always say, you know, one of the greatest gifts that my daughter Justice gave me was learning to embrace that shivot. But it didn't really only come from Justice. It came from many other shivets in my life where I learned to stop fighting the shivot and lean into it and gather, you know, what I can from it in terms of opportunity and learning and strength and empowerment to move forward. There can be some complaining along the way that this absolutely stinks, but you got to lean into it so that you don't completely go out of control. Next slide, please. All right, so the first sort of shivot or place that I really want to talk about in my life is my foundations in childhood. Hopefully you find these really old pictures rather amusing. I took pictures of pictures and there's lots of old ones showing a little bit how old I am in addition to the wrinkles and everything else that show up on these Zoom spotlights. But I was absolutely blessed to grow up a lot of my years until high school, really, in and out of different countries overseas. My father was a water resource engineer and worked for different consulting projects and companies doing United Nations work, World Bank work, and otherwise. So at the age of 4, I lived in the country of Chile in South America. And then I started kindergarten and first grade in Caracas, Venezuela. And then from 2nd to 7th grade, for the most part, I was living in Bangladesh. All these pictures here, the 3 on the left, or the L, I guess, from the left, are growing up in Bangladesh. That was, I guess the bottom left one is one of my birthday parties. I had a massive sleepover and my dad's company secretaries all came and we all had henna painted on our hands and tried on saris and did all kinds of things. It was an absolutely amazing upbringing. I wish that I could give that same traveling the world to my children. Keep hope alive for that someday after the pandemic. But it really created this foundation in my heart about connecting with people around the world and finding similarities and embracing those differences. In Bangladesh in particular, you know, I went to an American international school. So I grew up with kids from around the world. And we had UN Day and all kinds of ways to learn and share each other's cultures and embrace them. We all had clubs, you know, tennis and pool and everything where we went. So there was the British club, the German club, the Swedish club, the American club, and we'd hop on the bus after school and go to each other's clubs. And I mean, it was a UN type of way to live. I wish everyone could grow up that way, you know, but Bangladesh was also the 4th poorest country in the world at the time when I was living there. So the abject poverty was crushing at times and I wasn't experiencing it, but to grow up amidst it and try to understand my existence and my privilege next to the utter starvation and poverty next to me was humbling. And it was quite a journey that continued, started in childhood and continued throughout my life, trying to make sense of it. But my mom did a lot of volunteer work. She and this Dutch woman were powerhouses, Gerda Roos, and they started a school for street children, borrowing basement space somewhere. Scabies was a major public health issue, and so we would, you know, make special kind of soap and hand it out and do different things. And she really kind of taught me to be able to, you know, take that heart and begin to create it into a voice, and not stand still when you find social injustice and turn it into social justice. So I carried that sort of sense with me, and you know, slowly tried to develop it as I moved forward in life. Okay, I think that's all. Well, one little thing I'll just talk, you can't quite see, if we can go back one real quick, I'll talk about, I'll just point out the sign up, the picture up to the right there. That is actually us standing on the bridge between, we were in a trip in Nepal, and we are standing on what's called Friendship Bridge with 1 foot in Nepal and 1 foot in Tibet. And it was in very tumultuous times when that bridge was not so friendly. But that's, I guess, what, you know, symbolically that foundation in childhood gave for me, is standing on that bridge, trying to connect not so friendly, and finding unity and friendship. All right, next slide, please. So the next place, and this was definitely a shivot in my life, and a shivot that really impacted me. And again, you know, so many of the shivets, we try to make sense of them as they're happening. But sometimes they play out later in our life too, and we don't always see their effects until later. And so I'll share one of the effects of this college experience later on, was very clear and very humbling. So as Marisol said, I went to the University of Notre Dame. I bleed blue and gold, go Irish. I was a swimmer, and I was fortunate enough to be able to swim in college. In my freshman year, we were actually traveling back from, it was a Thursday night, it was January 24th, 1992, and the men and women's team usually traveled and swam together, but for some reason we were separate, and we drove over to Chicago and swam Northwestern, and we had class the next morning, so we were hurrying back to get back into our dorms, into bed, so we could get some sleep before 8 a.m. class Friday morning. And unfortunately, it was a snowstorm. It's a snowstorm that's called a whiteout, where you really can't see anything. We have the same bus driver. We had the same bus driver always, and very, you know, personal relationship with him, and he took care of us as his sort of family, and was trying very hard to get us home on time. It was just past midnight, and we had been watching the movie Dying Young on the way back, and the movie had just ended, and I was laying down reading, preparing for my Shakespeare class on Friday morning, laying down on the seat next to me. My teammate was next to me, had gotten up to move closer to the screen, so I was laying down. She came back, and she said, "Oh, keep laying down, stay there," and she sat across the aisle from me. And within a minute or two from that, you could hear Howard say, "Hold on." And the bus did a 180 and flipped over into the ravine. And as we were turning, the windows opened, and 2 of my teammates, one who was right in front of me and one who was right behind me, flew out the windows and were killed. Haley, who had been sitting with me but said, "Oh, just stay laying down, I'll sit over here," was paralyzed. There was injuries all over the place. It was slow motion and fast motion. It was utter chaos, and very hard to make sense of. So that night we lost 2 teammates, and it was quite a long journey back to Triumph. Haley eventually did, about a year and a half later, not only recovered and was able to walk again, but actually got in the pool and swam again for Notre Dame, which was really amazing. But that, see, the tears are going to come already again. That was really hard as an 18-year-old kid to have that happen. And I had tremendous support and guidance from our coaches, who were just amazing men. They had 34 different women on that bus and 34 different experiences. And then you had a men's team who wasn't there with us, who felt tremendous guilt that they weren't there to protect us. And then you had a university campus that came around behind us, and all of our families and everyone. And so everyone was very supported, and we all handled it differently. I was a rising star on the team. I was, 5/10 away from making national cuts. and Olympic trials. And so I was ready to go. I just needed to rest in the spring and go to my meets and nail it. And I was moving on my dream. And then the bus accident happened and I never swam the same way again. I had an injury, but it wasn't visible. I actually swam. The picture on the right is those of us who could swim swam in a meet, I guess the week after the accident. I'm the fourth from the right there, and we won the meet. It was absolutely amazing and one of the most amazing experiences of my life. But I never could swim again. There was, I think, some things that got pulled in my back perhaps that injured or that healed incorrectly, and I never swam the same way again. And that's really challenging as an athlete when you're rising up and then it's just taken from you. But it wasn't fully taken, it was just taken in different. And so I worked a lot with a sports psychologist and the head trainer to learn to accept, you know, and as Mickey Franco, the psychologist, taught me, you know, everyone is given a cross in life to carry. Of course, I was at a Catholic university, and so there was a lot of faith-based metaphors and inspirations and guidance. But I really learned to take that cross and bear it and carry it and embrace it and find, you know, through challenge and through tragedy and tremendous loss, there is always good and there is always learning. And that was really hard to do as a teenager, to learn that. And I got a lot of looks from a lot of friends that were like, why are you leaning into this so much? I wasn't quite sure, and I wasn't sure what I was doing, but as I learned later on, it was one of the most pivotal times in my life for teaching and forming me. And the win that I have on here, the notes, is my coach, Tim Welsh, used to always, we called them Tim-isms, lots of little sayings and things that he would do throughout the day and throughout life to make us go. And win doesn't mean win, although we all desperately wanted to win. We were cutthroat competitors. But win means what's important now. And after that accident, you know, he went back to that saying that we use, what's important now. As swimmers, we swim. And I've used that throughout my life, you know, when Justice got sick, which I'll tell you about later, and when she died. You know, we said the next morning after she died, what's important now? As swimmers, we swim. And as her family, we move forward. And that was such a tremendous lesson. And the other is team. You know, everyone says, oh, swimming, it's so individual. It's not a team sport. It is a team sport. And those principles of being on other sports teams and being on one at the university level or the collegiate level taught me so much. And is at the foundation of how I approach family professional partnership and the way that I try to say we need to do interprofessional education and multidisciplinary care and work together. There is no I in team. And that I carried really forward from them. Okay. Whew, okay. Got through that pretty good without crying too much. All right, next shivot, please. Thank you. Okay, so the next really major shivot after college came in my sort of winding path from one graduate school to the next. After college, I started working. I picked up all kinds of jobs I could get. I started coaching swimming. I worked as a case manager in a transitional housing project for pregnant women with children, and then also started working as an adult health specialist at a nonprofit finding healthcare and dental care for those who didn't have Medicaid or insurance. And that really sent me to, you know, I was trying to decide, do I do social work? Do I do public health? Because I had grown up overseas, I always thought, okay, I'm going back overseas. I'm going to do development work. I'm not as smart as my father to do engineering or full-on economics or whatever. So I decided to do public health. And because I was a feminist, or feminazi as my brother called me, I thought that I really wanted to focus on women's health issues, and particularly violence against women. I had done volunteering in college and sexual assault services supports, and you know, all of the ways in which women are survivors of violent situations and abusive situations really inspired me, and I saw the importance of that and saw it as a public health issue. So I went down to Tulane And I started in this internship with the Office of Public Health, and the supervisor there really saw also violence against women as a public health issue. And so we got together with some folks over in the New Orleans Parish courts and decided to do a court watching project, just sort of monitoring what's going on in these courts. It was like if anyone saw the old show Night Court, like where it's actually crazy and people are hanging from the rafters and all. That's how it was. It was fascinating. And this woman also in the MPH program with me, Leanne, and I were doing that. And we had a great time. We got to know each other really well, and we're involved in all kinds of things with this task force in New Orleans for to end violence against women. And then one weekend I called Leanne and left several messages and didn't hear back from her, and it really was not like her. And so finally I tried her one more time on Sunday evening, and her roommate answered and was very suspicious in her answering. And well, where is Leanne? Do you know? And I was like, what? No, I'm calling her. Leanne was abducted from the French Quarter on the way home from school that Friday and raped and murdered. And so that was one of those sort of lived experience things. I had been watching things unfold in a court. I had, in college supported survivors of sexual assault. And then I felt like I was thrust into the court system in a different way with, a sister, a friend who had been subjected to violence. And I found myself navigating this court system from a very different perspective, a lived experience perspective, and it was even more overwhelming and opened my eyes to, I can watch it as a public health professional, but then I experience it, and that's a whole different thing. And what does that mean? And how do I bring that together professionally? Thankfully, the murder of Leanne was actually the fastest murder solved in New Orleans. And so he was brought to justice, and he had a really rough life and, was influenced by drugs and all kinds of things to do what he did. It was very unfortunate, but it was a very pivotal moment in my life. So then I decided, there's something about this intersection of public health and law that's really interesting. So I went back to Virginia and started working in a battered women's shelter. And because I had grown up some overseas, I definitely had Spanish in my back pocket. And so I started working a lot with our clients in the shelter who spoke Spanish. And I started realizing a lot of these women don't have secure immigration status, and they're not going to be able to get to safe situations and take care of any of their public health or other needs until they get their legal status secured. And so I started thinking about, maybe I should go to law school. And so I went to law school. There was this really great nonprofit that I ended up working at. It was sort of why I went to law school. Is a place in DC called the Ayuda. It had started in the 70s and 80s with the influx of Central American refugees, supporting them, and had a niche practice in the Violence Against Women Act. There was some forms of immigration relief in there. And so after law school, I started clerking for a judge, and then Ayuda called me one day and say, hey, we got an opening. And so I ran and jumped into that. All of that to say, it's probably TMI about understanding the decisions I made, but I just really wanted to illustrate there that, those pivots and shifts and shivets in my life in terms of deciding what I wanted to do professionally and how much money I spent and where I went to spend my money on getting this education was very much influenced by my lived experience. And I think really, I wrote here, passion is a driver. And I think that goes back to the foundations in childhood as well, that, leading with your heart, which is exhausting, and you need to protect yourself and otherwise, but it just really solidified for me that I've never worked just to work. There has to be a purpose and a meaning and something I'm trying to do, in some way I'm trying to use my voice. And another important thing here is that I I paid a lot of money for schools, but really and tremendous skills from them too. But the most important skills that I learned were from my lived experience, and learning to embrace that. And it can be hard when you're in an academic arena and, you know, the focus is one way, but learning how to bring that in is really important. Next slide, please. Thanks, Avery, for trying to anticipate where to go so I don't have to tell you. I appreciate that. So this shivit probably doesn't need much explanation for any of us. You know, the shivit that happens in life and continues to happen when you have children. These are the Coleman chaos is what I nicknamed ourselves. You know, once things got crazier in life, you know, with the introduction of medical complexity, and I was trying to sort of make fun of the chaos and make sense of it and laugh at the same time and embrace it. So these pictures are of my kids' one Christmas. I was trying to come up with a creative Christmas picture. And so we were really into making our own pizzas then. And so I made them all dress up as little chefs, and I introduced them as the Coleman Chaos Little Chefs. So on the left is the big boy, Gibraltar James. He is my oldest. He's 16 now. He's a junior in high school. And basketball is king for him. And then to the right, down to the right, is Justice. She is number 2 in line. And she, let's see, she was born just a little under 2 years after Gibraltar. And she is how I got into really shifted. I'll talk about soon the career change I made, but she's how I got into the health advocacy work. Justice was born at 37 weeks. She had agenesis corpus callosum and just a whole host of other things, you know, moving down the body that we watched and everything. And she had multiple disabilities. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about her other complexities later and how they came on in terms of a pivot and shift. But she, as you can tell there, she's up in her stander cooking and has a huge smile. And that was very much her heart and her life and her light. And she was a great joy. And then up above her is the other sister, Keziah Katrina Coleman. And you can tell from that girl has some fire. She is an intense little child, and she is 11 years old now and in 5th grade. Yep, sorry. Still at the beginning of the school year. I don't always remember what grade anybody is. And then bringing up the rear here is the baby of the family, and that's Titus Dylan Coleman. He is 9, and he's one of those babies that has so much funk and fire and humor. Like, we try really hard not to laugh and react to, he just puts these zingers out there that you're like, oh, he gets away with a lot, but is the youngest that is always, you know, complaining like, when am I gonna grow up? So anyway, I think the thing that I'll say most about my children and the shivit that was and is and continues to be with them is that they've reformed my type A personality. It's not fully reformed, really, because there's many days where my husband comes home, he's like, chill. I'm like, I'm trying to chill. But they've given me the opportunity to reform my type A personality. It steps into place when it needs to, but also, you know, as I said earlier, like, you know, one of the greatest gifts Justice gave me, you know, and those of us who have, you know, stepped into disability world, I think can agree that, you know, learning about life and viewing it through the lens of accommodation and requiring flexibility is such a gift. You just put those, Angela's orientation had the different glasses on, right? It is such a gift to put those other glasses on and be able to view the world, you know, so much more expansively and creatively. And this is one of those shivets, I think, with kids where, I mean, personally, I'm doing it all the time, like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. This is so hard. And this stinks at times, you know, even in this pandemic now, this is so hard for them and for us. But I try to embrace it and lean into the reform the type A personality and take what they're teaching, because as Angela and her orientation was really going over too, the youth voice they can teach us so much. So next slide, please, Avery. All right, so that career change I was alluding to. So I had Gibraltar, and then 20 months later, I had Justice, and our world was really, you know, rocked, but not. We knew ahead of time at that 20-week ultrasound something was going on. I don't remember them telling us anything about something going on with her brain. We had a follow-up then at 27 weeks, and that's when we knew that both of her kidneys were dilated and her third ventricle was dilated, and so we just watched and induced at 37 weeks to see, you know, what is going on. And she spent the first 2 months in the NICU, and, you know, had agenesis callosum and had things go all different kinds of ways. We tried feeding her for 10 days. And when I finally got one entire bottle of, you know, nectar consistency formula or breast milk into her, I was so proud. And then we realized she aspirated the entire thing. So we went for the G-tube from really early on, and really spent, you know, there was of course bumps along the way and stuff, but spent the first 6 years of her life really just learning how to navigate the world, and making sure that she could be a kid. Thankfully, we had doctors who taught us, the pulmonologist that we met in the NICU. Now, see, that's where I'm going to cry too, because there are certain providers that, you know, become family on that journey with you. And Dr. Clayton was that for us. You know, thankfully, she didn't always have a lot of pulm issues, but he was always there guiding us, and really teaching us to expand sort of outside of our thinking. He always was saying, you know, you're going to get all kinds of diagnoses and people are going to say stuff, but your job is to love her and be her mom, and be her dad. And that's what you need to do. We're so thankful we didn't get, you know, what some other families do of she'll never do this, she'll never do that. We learned early, like, we're not listening to that, and that doesn't matter. She's got to be a kid. So, you know, I guess I was starting to say that those first 6 years were not that hard in navigation, but it was. Those first 2 years were intense of learning, you know, how you handle life and all these appointments. You know, we had 3 to 5 appointments a week, and everybody's following and monitoring. Is she going to grow out of this? Is she going to grow into this? What's going to happen? So that part was really hard. And I was still working at a UDA and had Gibraltar young too, and I wasn't quite sure what to do. And I started thinking, you know, I am navigating this very broken immigration system for my clients, who at the time were, you know, asylum seekers, people trying to get U and T visas, which is for non-citizen victims of crime and human trafficking and domestic abuse, you know, very emotional and broken for them. And then also personally now navigating in learning this system that was rather fragmented and confusing. And so I decided that I could only be in one broken system. And so I decided I used partners in policy making as my way to transition into disability world and healthcare work. And it was, you know, life-changing pivot again. It was really hard to lean into that. That type A would come out and say, well, you know, this is what you're supposed to do. And people would say, what do you mean you're not practicing law? There's a lot of other things you can do with a law degree. And also that doesn't matter. It's that lived experience and cultivating that with my other skills. So the reason I have here disability is natural, and then Angela, a different version of glasses there, my rose-colored glasses, is that if anyone's done partners in policy making, perhaps you've heard Kathy Snow speak and give her People First talk. It was the first night of partners in policy making, and it absolutely rocked my world. You know, for me as a lawyer, I fixate on words and or and commas, and the right word, you know, is worth, you know, millions of dollars and makes a difference. And particularly I learned then the difference it makes for moving our kids with disabilities and special healthcare needs forward, so that they're seen as more than patients. They're seen as amazing children that they are. So as part of partners in policy making, I decided to write a book as my project. It came to me sort of in the middle of the night. I was pregnant also at the time with Keziah, so I was having a lot of sleepless nights. And I don't know why, but that Helen Reddy, I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar song came to my head and was the foundation of the title for the book, I Am Justice, Hear Me Roar. But it also, I mean, it was so perfect, you know, when those sort of synergy and things come together and you know it's not you in life, it is something greater and bigger than you. And it was Justice's personality, the way she laughed, the way she roared. And so I wrote the children's book, and that's what came out of Partners in Policymaking for me. And it was important for what I hope to try to weave through the rest here is then, you know, I talked about taking my skills through my education and melding them with my lived experience. And the next sort of step of what this began to bring out for me was, you know, identifying those certain passions and those certain things that you decide that you're really going to push for and move forward. A lot of people and Partners in Policymaking said to me, well, you know, you're a lawyer, just go, you know, hang up your shingle and go do special ed law. I didn't feel that in my gut or in my heart. And it's important. And I learned a lot from, you know, what I did helping, you know, my daughter and her IEP and others, but it was that passion of the words. And when I watched the power of the transformation of sharing Justice's, you know, book and changing people's hearts and minds that way, that really began to learn to identify, you know, from our experience and what we're navigating, identifying what works and what doesn't work, and ways and solutions and ways we can come together for change. And then just deciding to kind of have those in my pocket of, I'm going to work on these issues because it's overwhelming, all the work that we need to do. So people first was really the foundation of how I moved that forward. So next slide, please. So this is the cover of the book. And then I put in there a little picture of Justice and I doing one of our book readings. The book was published by CSA Create, which was actually founded by the illustrator Lori Shue, who was my neighbor. She is quite an artist and an author herself, and she was the founder of Abracadoodle before it was sold and other stuff. So she illustrated the book. She and Justice had a very special relationship. So the book is really cool because it really captures Justice's personality. And Lori used to just watch her and all her little, you can see, I think I'll show you in the next picture, her fingers are crossed a certain way, and it's just what Justice would do with her hands, and it's really cool. So next slide, please. So this is just one of the, you know, pages of the book and the story, and this is one I'm sure that you've sort of seen. You can see how it really works off of what People First teaches. And Justice and I and Lori too would start sharing the book at different schools and libraries and Girl Scout troops and anybody who would have us come in and read the book. And it was, you know, just absolutely amazing. I'm sure you guys have had these sort of experiences before when you've shared stories or shared experiences or given input or received it, you know, where it just transforms. And I'll describe the impact of one of those transformations. It was the last time we did a book reading before Justice got sick at age 6. And we were at this elementary school that you can just flat out call very bougie. We were reading after school for a Girl Scout troop. Not a very diverse school. So I come in with my biracial family and people are already like, and I come in with a girl who is nonverbal, non-ambulatory, just looking a little bit different in all kinds of ways, and tubes coming, you know, up to her G-tube and all kinds of stuff. And you also see the little girl's, you know, lips kind of turn up and all that. And we've seen that before, and that's okay, because that's part of it, right? And, you know, you read this book, you see their fear, and we're reading the book. And this is usually sort of the transformation part, because the book is really about showing how we're all doing the same thing. And, you know, I just do it a little bit differently than you. So by the time I get to the page, it's like a couple pages after this where I say, oh, actually time check. I'm going too slow. Okay, I'm moving in my story. Sorry. you know, I get to the page where I'm saying, you know, I just eat a little bit differently than you and I have a G tube. The next thing I know, I usually say, you know, and if you want us to show you that, you know, we can. And usually we do it after. Whoom, all these girls were on top of us. And what they wanted to do was connect with Justice. Justice, I like your hair bows. Justice, I like your shoes. Justice, I like, and you just physically saw that transformation and the power of those words in those kids. And it was so humbling and amazing. So next slide, please. So this getting sick that I refer to. So one morning, Justice woke up when she was 6. It was February 2nd, 2012. And I knew something was different. She had had surgeries before and been sick in different ways and hospitalizations. But I just knew this was different. And her stomach, as the day went on, you know, expanded so much, it was as if she had a basketball in there and we really were not sure what was happening. She had a right colonic volvulus, which is just a really nasty bowel obstruction. She had 4 surgeries over 10 days, spent 2 months in the PICU, and you know, it was catastrophic. They put her back together, and we went home, and then everything fell apart again in a week, and then we just could not get things going again, and we just, you know, she had another obstruction and another and another. And it was just trying to figure out, you know, my oldest always says that Justice and I were gone for a year. That year, first year of medical complexity was really hard. Titus was just 1 year old. It was chaos. But amidst that catastrophe and challenge, I spent Monday through Friday at the hospital with her, and my husband spent the weekend. And so I really connected with a lot of the doctors and a lot of the nurses. And one of the hospitalists taking care of her in particular had just become the assistant dean of curriculum at the VCU Inova campus of the medical school. And she got a hold of the children's book and she was like, could you come read this to the medical students? And I was like, but it's a children's book. And she's like, exactly. So that started this whole relationship and the foray that Justice and I then did into medical education and beyond. So I highlight that because that really, I'll talk about in a couple slides too, really launched me even further and in a different way into medical education and my journey as a family leader. Next slide, please. All right, let's go to the next slide because I'm behind. I'm gonna skip this slide because okay, so the medical educator. So that day or a few days later, we unhooked Justice and went down and read the book. And Justice, even though she felt awful, performed at all the right times and did different things to let these medical students who had never taken care of a child, you know, who was nonverbal and non-ambulatory and all these nons, you know, to learn and see that she is a kid, that there's a kid behind that patient, and it's really important. And so we would read every year then for the regional campus where we were, the students were down in Richmond for the 1st and 2nd year and would come up for 3rd and 4th year. So Justice and I were first thing off the bat at orientation for 3rd year, talking about humanism, reading the book, going through these instructions of like, relax, talk to my kid, look at my kid, really simple communication guiding things. And it has been also extremely humbling to watch those seeds that we planted and watch them grow through one of our first students to go through an elective that I created for 4th years is now totally focused on complex care and creating family professional partnerships and medical education and stuff, all from her experience, you know, working and learning from Justice. And the education that we did in the school expanded to, I became co-director of a longitudinal course, the Physician, Patient, and Society. And Alicia Freedy and I, who was the hospitalist who brought me into this work, she and I created a 4th year medical home elective. And then also I did monthly lectures on the ambulatory clerkship where I use my care map, the Coleman Chaos Care Map, to walk through and just plant the seeds of, you know, as you go out into this ambulatory care, which is not really the focus often of medical education, you know, take time to look and think about what it's like to navigate all this for all of your patients and the complexity and the importance of all of us partnering together you know, asking the right questions and talking about the right things, you know, as we are ordering things and making shared plans of care and other things like that. So medical education has been such an opportunity, that sort of growth and progression of people first language, and helping me infuse it at that young, when they're toddlers in medical education. I mean that in the most loving way. But it's such an opportunity to plant that seed when medical students are young. Doesn't matter if they're going to peds or beyond. It's really been critical for me, and teaching me also, as I began to develop my own voice and which way to move forward, how to do doctor speak, and how to talk and take what I knew of all the systems and my own personal experience, and phrase it in a way that isn't in their face and I dissent, but pushing, but working together and bringing that team together. Next slide, please. So from the medical education, they actually sent me to one conference where sort of kind of opened up and networked. I'm really kind of an introvert. And my husband often is like, "You network?" I'm like, "Yeah, sort of, sometimes." I try to, but when I'm at conferences like you guys are now, or summits, there's that certain feeling and a certain opportunity. And at this one conference that the medical school sent me to, it was when Alicia and I were building our medical home elective, the Patient-Centered Primary Care Collaborative Conference. I met folks at Family Voices National and at the Institute for Patient and Family Centered Care, and we just connected, and that was that. It was a little bit of time and keeping in contact with them and connecting, and so it's probably a year or two for both until I was hired on in different roles. But the importance of it for me was that connection and the networking. And you know, they fed me different things and sent me looking at different information and research and back and forth, and sort of cultivating, and really helped raise me up as a family leader, and understanding, you know, the value of my lived experience and what I had to share, and the importance of that peer support and connection. I never had that in caring for justice, and you know, we had been referred some along the way to different peer supports, but it was not quite at the right times in our journey where I could take advantage of it. So I really took advantage of it, though, in becoming a family leader, and understanding, you know, that my experience is my experience, but it's not alone, and learning how to cultivate all those voices from around the country, and, you know, meld that into my voice and the voice of justice and how we move things forward. And this actually is a replica, one of the versions of the Coleman Chaos Care Map that I use. You guys have seen Kristen Lynn's care map, I'm sure, or just all the other prongs. And, you know, the tool that I like to use here is the picture of our family, really as the core of it, because I think family-centered care, you know, is one of the most amazing and brilliant things, right? A definition of team, but it sometimes is really a noun. And what are the ways we can turn it into verbs and actions together? How do we operationalize this and do it? And so sometimes family-centered is an adjective or a noun. And so by putting my family's picture here, I'm trying to remind you there are faces here. There are real people and quality of life and family well-being, and melding that with the clinical shared plan of care. And I mean, what are you going to do when you got cute faces like that looking at you? We all got to work together, right? Just a little IEP tool of the trade. Okay, so next slide, please. Whoop, other way, yep. Okay, so we're almost here at the end. Okay, I got a few more minutes. I'm so sorry, guys. So as I've alluded to before, my sweet girlie passed away. She died on March 25th of 2017. She was 11 years old. And she probably about 15 months before she died, her dad and I knew, again, something is really not right. And it's really different, and she's really tired in a different kind of way. And so I had been learning a lot, you know, in developing myself as a family leader about palliative care. And I sort of wondered, wait, this is about symptom and pain management. Why isn't this with everybody who has chronic care that has symptoms and pain issues from the start? So I began to seek out palliative care to support her. That was a very complex journey of resistance from providers to bringing in palliative, which was shocking to me. And, you know, the lack of integrated care coordination in Justice's whole life, even though I spoke earlier of some of her champions, you know, like her pulmonologists and stuff, just, you know, we had tremendous providers, but it was all those silos. We were across multiple health systems that didn't communicate. It was mess. And when somebody's life is ending, you know, we wanted even more to have quality of life. And it went the opposite way. And Justice had a lot of pain that went untreated. It was it was awful. It was heart-wrenching, and I tried so hard, and it was just a mess. And I still, you know, I blame myself a lot for, did I push the wrong way? Did I not push or whatever? But, you know, leaning into those shivets, you know, moms are always going to have those kinds of feelings, for better or worse, but trying to figure out, okay, what is the lesson here? How can we communicate better? Why can't we have integrated care coordination? Why can't we communicate what is going on in the development of the model of delivery of care to the implementation? What demystifying do we need to do? How do we design these things better? With a family voice sure helps. And so just trying to take and make sense of the, you know, the awfulness of what we were going through, and listen to other families and cultivate a voice around that. And the biggest thing of this, you know, Shivet is hope. That's Justice's middle name, Justice Hope. And, you know, carrying that and finding it in everything. The picture of her on the left is what we call boogie chairing, because she didn't have a boogie board at the beach. We rent those beach wheelchairs, and darn if those wheels don't float. So she would float away in that. And the picture on the right is Justice was home in hospice care in our home for 8 days before she passed away. And she had been in the hospital for 3 weeks prior. And when we came home, it was, you know, March, spring. And this bluebird started coming to the transom window out, you know, of her room, and it would start pecking. And at first we're like, oh, Justice, it's the birds. They've come to see you. Welcome home. Justice loved to be outside. Then we were living in a more rural part of Northern Virginia, and fields and everything around us. And we're always out walking, and we're like, oh, your friends are here. And then they came the next morning and started getting a little more frantic as Justice began to have terminal agitation set in and was really uncomfortable. The bird was also frantic and uncomfortable at the window every morning. So this picture was taken by one of the hospice nurses the morning that we baptized her, and we really were able to then transition her to a little more comfort. And hopefully you can see, there are clearly the wings that are the bird's wings, and then there are these other luminescent wings. And every picture we took of this bird that came had these luminescent wings. So we really shifted, pivoted and shifted. And I was holding her when Ileana took this picture, and I said, oh my gosh, Justice, it's Jesus himself. There's an angel here for you, honey. It is time to go and to fly away. And it changed, you know, how we viewed and how we carried through the next few days, and the comfort that this bluebird gave to us and inspired all of us, and hope, and everybody that was there caring, and helped our children as well just know that, you know, she was going to be okay, and we were too. So the bird came every single morning. Once she was calmer, he would come and just say hello periodically. And then she died Saturday night. And so Sunday morning we woke up saying, oh my goodness, is this bird going to come again? And he came, but he came to, not to her window, but to where, when we were all sitting trying to eat some breakfast together, and, you know, we were able to go up and put our hand up, you know, to the bird at the window, and he flew away. So we have this gift of hope that Justice gave us, you know, in the seeds that she planted in our life. Next slide, please. But then also, you know, the hope from every time we see a bluebird, we see our daughter. And I only have 2 more slides. I promise I will get through them quick and maybe have some questions, but this is just speaking of the seeds planted in life. You know, we often talk about the impact on the beloved siblings of our kids with special healthcare needs. Oh gosh. And you know, it's such a challenging life, but it is a life that builds such resilience and grit and compassion. And Linda Starnes, you used those words earlier this week in the CC Academy chat. I saw that you put in there grit and compassion. And these are just samples of some of the writing and things that my kids have done, taking Justice's life and trying to have it make sense in their life, and work through the challenge and the pain, and lean into that hope and find it always. It's been quite remarkable. And so, you know, that's one of those things I really rail strongly against. It's not burden. The burden is the system and the fragmentation. Our children are absolute gifts, all of them. And even if they're nonverbal, the things that they can teach us, and the lives they lead are amazing. Next slide, please. So I'll leave you with, of course, this lovely Emily Dickinson poem that, you know, is Justice to a T, but just showing you the hope and the way that Justice carries on. The bottom image is the palliative and hospice agency that took care of Justice, developed since she passed a children's program, and they've designed a bluebird as their logo, and take Justice's story as the logo and promoting the children's program. So she lives on and comforting and delivering hope that way. And then the picture here is, we have an award that's bestowed in her honor at her old school. And then also this is a picture of, we gave out the first award, my kids and I, at the medical school. It's called the Justice Hope Bluebird Award for Humanism in Medicine. So these are just a few of the ways that she continues to live on, and she definitely does, as she helps me, teaches me to cultivate my voice, and share it as widely and nationally as I can, for our kiddos. So I hope that you've been able to follow me on this windy, shivity path, and that it's made sense, and gives you some inspiration, and some thoughts and some tangible tools, and we can work together and move forward. So I think, next slide, I think I'm done. Yay.
Thank you so much, Cara, for the powerful, inspirational, and just so moving and heart-wrenching story too. You've been through so much. I just wanted to share some of the takeaways that I've seen, some of the common comments that were in the chat area. So with shifting, the idea of shifting and pivoting and how to adjust one's life in order to work through challenges, to think of tragedy and loss and realize that there is always learning from that. A lot of people loved what's important now, when. So I think that's going to be a huge takeaway today as well. And then the new normal, our idea of adjusting, again, adjusting and shifting, that really resonated a lot with the viewers and people in attendance. So another common theme was networking and the importance of networking in order to help fix and provide solutions for our broken system. So I think that was the main themes that I saw in the chat area. We did have some questions, but in order to kind of stay on time, I'm going to just read off one of the questions because we only have a few minutes, and I want to make sure that we respect everyone's time and allow for a 10-minute break. So let me go back in here real quick. One of the questions that I thought was really interesting is, are there people in the family leadership world that you see as mentors, and how important do you think it is to have a mentor in this family leadership role?
I think it's really important. I think that's too why I sort of, you know, feel even more reflective, you know, this week with Ruth Bader Ginsburg. You know, she's not in the family leader world, but she felt like that way to me. And even hearing, you know, Johnny and Angela and your sort of mentorship type relationship, and Linda Mix, you know, for me, Nora Wells at Family Voices and Bev Johnson at IPFCC and Marie Abraham at IPFCC have been tremendous mentors. And, you know, like, for example, coming in you know, I didn't do a lot of advocacy in Virginia and family leadership work there. I sort of launched because of them, like into a national level, but needing to get my bearings. Nora's always so good at talking about the history, where we've come as a national family leader movement, and where we've come from and are as family voices and as the affiliate, you know, like always reflecting back and forward and acknowledging what we've accomplished together. And that's been so helpful for me on, you know, because I often go into settings where I'm the only family leader on big systems of care and all this kind of stuff, and I'm having so hard to push for quality of life and family well-being have to be a part of this, you know, care coordination and partnership, you know, and hitting these big walls, that it helps me, you know, I hear those certain mentor words and voices, you know, guiding, okay, take a deep breath and talk about, don't be angry with, oh, this isn't changing, or this isn't, or we've now taken steps back, but looking at where we've come and where we can go to influence. So I think it's really tremendous. And I think mentors come from in all different shapes and sizes in the state. You know, like a Bluebird is a mentor to me now in a way I never would have expected. And so being open to those mentors in the family world and outside and cultivating those relationships.
Wonderful, thank you. So it is 11 o'clock. I do have some other questions that people put in the chat. I'll be sharing them with Angela so we can get some answers out to people. We'll probably share them on the app or somehow. Angela can figure that out. She's the best. And then, so in the spirit of taking a break, here's my little one having a snack, and you can all enjoy your snack. We have 10 minutes to break now until 11:10. Thank you, everybody, and thank you so much again.
Thank you
Cara,
guys so much.
Appreciate you.